What's up, you guys? Welcome back. Today is an exciting day. We are finally putting the 3D GeoJig from Birch Glass to the test. So not only are we going to be testing out this GeoJig, we are actually going to be trying out one of their patterns as well. We are making the Marquise Spinner. So if you want to make this piece alongside me and you want to buy either the GeoJig or just the pattern, you can do so on their website. I will have all of the applicable links in my description box down below. If you want to buy just the pattern, you can do that. If you want to buy the GeoJig, you will get 2 free tutorials including patterns. At first, I was thinking I wanted to do the 6-sided spinner, but after I decided on the sun catcher, the big sun catcher that is in the center of this spinner, I knew that I wanted it to be as open as possible, so I ended up kind of going back on that, and we're doing just the 4-sided spinner. So when you buy this pattern, you will get all of the instructions included, so they have everything laid out for you that you can print out. If you use stained glass, if you are a stained glass maker, this stuff is pretty self-explanatory. It's a pretty simple pattern, so we are just going to get straight to it. As I mentioned, we are making the Marquise Spinner, and we are doing the 4-sided spinner, which means we need to copy this pattern twice. So I've already gone ahead and printed out my pattern, and I have laminated it because we're going to have to use it twice. I just like to laminate my patterns because I use them as a traceable pattern and reuse them. So I've already printed it out, laminated it. Now I'm just going to go ahead and cut the pattern out. Now, once I've cut along all outside edges of the pattern, I go ahead and go inside and cut each individual piece out. As you can see, I already have each individual piece numbered, and that is going to be for each colored glass. I'm only doing a couple colors of glass here because I want to keep it very simple. I'm going for a nice, beautiful, clean winter theme, so we can go straight into tracing all of these pieces on our glass. If you guys are new here, there are many ways to make stained glass. There are many ways of using a pattern. This is just how I make and use my patterns. I cut them out and trace them, and they are reusable. A lot of people stick their patterns directly to the glass. I do not prefer that method. So I am going to go ahead and trace out all of my number 1s that I designated as my white glass and trace those on the white, and then I'm going to take all of my pattern pieces that I designated as number 2 and use the blue iridescent glass for that. So I'm just going to trace all of these pattern pieces out, and then we can move on to cutting. Okay, so now that I've got all of my pieces traced out onto my glass with Sharpie, now I'm going to go in and start cutting all of these pieces out. What you see me using here is called a pencil grip glass cutter. That is just the specific style of glass cutter. And to be honest with you, I say this all the time, I don't know why these are called glass cutters because they don't cut glass. All they do is score them. They should be called glass scorers or a glass scoring tool. I don't know. Besides the point, we go in, we use our glass cutter to score the glass, and then we're going to use another tool to go in and break those scores. So everywhere where we've scored the glass from edge to edge, we can go back in with, example, what I'm using here. These are called running pliers. Pinch that score open, and it will break the glass along where we've scored. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that for every single piece that I've traced out. Using my pencil grip glass cutter, I'm going in, scoring all along the outside edges of all my traced pieces. Then I'm going back in with my running pliers and pinching and breaking every single one of these scores opened to get my traced pieces out. Alright, now once you've got all of your glass pieces cut out, you have to take it over to a grinding machine. Yes, you have to grind all of your glass pieces. This is not optional. Not only do you have to do it to make sure it fits the pattern perfectly, but you need to do it to be able to grind and rough up those edges so your copper foil, the next step, is going to stick correctly to the glass. If you do not grind it, it's not going to come out well. Sure, you can skip grinding if you really want to, if you're not selling your work, if you're just practicing. Do I recommend it? Absolutely not. The reality is you have to invest, you have to get some sort of glass grinder. So essentially what this is exactly what it sounds like. It's a glass grinder. So right in the center here, we have a spinning bit. So it is a diamond coated bit, and we are taking all of our cut glass pieces and running them up along the edge very lightly, very gently of that grinding bit. And that is going to kind of soften soften the super sharp edges of the glass, and it is also our opportunity to go in and shave away any excess glass that we didn't cut away with our glass cutter. So we can go in here and really precisely match up our pieces to what we need it to be in the pattern. So every so often you can see me kind of bending over off screen here. Yes, I am using safety glasses as well as a hair cap because I don't want glass shards absolutely everywhere. I have a lot of hair. Every so often you see me kind of bending over off screen here, and what I'm doing is taking each piece and putting it up against my pattern. So I have an extra pattern all the time on hand, so I can do just that. It is also laminated, so the water and all the glass mud isn't going to mess it up. And I'm taking these pieces off the grinder very quickly, matching it up on the pattern, and as soon as I've got the perfect shape, I know it's good to go and is going to go in the water bucket to the right. So inside this glass grinder, right underneath that grate, is water. You need water inside your glass grinder to actually not only keep the bit cool, but to actually grind away the glass. If you don't have that kind of lubrication, you're not going to get much glass ground. It is going to wear out your grinder super fast, and it is going to get very, very hot. After all of your pieces are ground, like I said, they will go to the right side where I've got a clean water bucket, and that is the first rinse before you take it to the sink. You do not ever take your freshly ground glass and go directly to the sink with it. All of that accumulated glass mud will destroy your pipes. So you need to make sure you are rinsing your glass not only once, twice if you can, before you take it to the sink for your third and final rinse before we take it back to our work desk and start foiling. Okay guys, we are almost at the fun part where we get to start assembling this thing, but the very last step before that is foiling. So I'm taking every single one of our freshly washed and ground pieces of glass here, and we are going to wrap every single edge in copper foil. So depending on what color glass I'm using kind of dictates what kind of foil I use and what size I want. So here you can see me using a black back copper foil, because even with a solid white glass, I find that a regular copper backed copper foil will still show through a bit of that copper tone when you hold that piece of white glass up into the sun. So I'm just going to go ahead and use black back copper foil for this entire piece, and I believe I'm using 1/4 inch. I wanted to go just a little bit thicker since this is the first time I am doing this design and it is a 3D piece. So I'm going in, wrapping every single edge in this sticky backed copper foil. Again, if you guys have any questions on any particular step in stained glass, I have dedicated videos to everything. I will have it all linked down in my description. So if you want to see a whole video on specifically how to copper foil, I will have that linked down below, just like every other step. So we're going to go ahead and finish copper foiling all these pieces. Then we can finally move on to the fun part and start putting this piece together. And of course, don't forget to burnish. That is the most important step of actually foiling all your pieces. So after I have everything evenly wrapped, I have an even amount on each side of every piece of glass, I'm going in and I am burnishing the heck out of every single piece. That is the most important part. That is going to really make sure that your copper foil is stuck down to that piece of glass. It's not going to go anywhere. Flux isn't going to get underneath it. And most importantly, that the solder, once you do go in with solder, isn't going to lift your copper foil tape. Alright you guys, we are finally getting to the fun part, and that is starting to actually assemble our spinner. So because we need very, very precise angles, everything needs to fit exactly how it is on the stencil, we are first going to tack solder all 4 of our pieces on top of the stencil. So once again here I have another copy of our Marquise Spinner pattern, and I am just simply laying all of our glass pieces together on top of this pattern to make sure everything fits exactly how it's supposed to. So what I'm doing is just lightly going in and giving a quick small tack solder to all of these pieces to hold it together as one before we can take it over to my soldering mat. So I am just placing all of these pieces right where they're supposed to be, matching everything up with the pattern. I'm going to tack solder it in place, so that means I'm just going in and dropping a bead of solder on every one of these joints, so everywhere where one piece of glass meets another. That way it is nice and stuck together. Then I can lift it up as one piece and take it over to the soldering mat to do the bulk of the soldering. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with all 4 pieces and then move on to actually soldering it together, tinning and building that bead. Okay, now we're at the fun part, and that is soldering and assembling this piece together. So the very first thing I just did was coat all of our copper foil edges in flux. I'm using a gel flux here, but I do prefer Novocaine liquid flux. I do enjoy the gel, but I just have a personal preference. I like the liquid. So what flux does is three things. It cleans the copper foil, it helps the solder flow more smoothly, and it helps the solder adhere to the copper foil as well. So it does those three very important things. You need to coat all of your copper foil edges before you can go in and solder. Then going in with our solder to essentially tin, which just means to lightly coat, and then we're going to go back in again and build that solder bead up. So you can see right here I am lightly building up that solder bead, which essentially just means kind of rounding it out, making it a little bit thicker versus just the tinning, which is a very light, very thin coat. So as we're kind of tinning and beading along this piece, we have to keep in mind we cannot build that bead up on this inside edge. So this, where this piece is going to meet up with all of the other pieces of the spinner, we can only tin right now. We have to keep it very, very thin. Not only these inside edges, but also in areas like this right here. So where the blue and white glass meets, if we have that edge super built up with a nice thick bead all the way down, that will also kind of impede on the design when we go to sit it inside the GeoJig. So we want this piece to sit nice and flat inside the GeoJig, so we are actually getting our angles to what we want them to be. But if we build these inner beads up super thick, it's not going to sit flat inside that GeoJig. So not only do we have to be aware of that in this area, we also have to be very, very careful and only tin the inside edge where we're meeting up all of these pieces together. So everywhere else is going to get a normal soldering, a normal tinning, normal beading, but those inside edges and where this piece is going to sit on the GeoJig, we've got to kind of keep it toned down, and then we'll go back in and build those beads up after we have this piece entirely connected together. Alright, so now that we've got all four sides of our pieces soldered together, we can finally start assembling this thing. Now, I do wish that I really only tack soldered this thing in place everywhere, because where I did go in and build up the bead anywhere where it touches the GeoJig, it still didn't sit quite flat, which is my fault. I should have just tack soldered this entire thing essentially, and then gone back in and soldered it after I had it assembled. It might be a little bit trickier if you were doing a 6-sided one where you don't have as much room, but with that being said, it was still really easy to use. This entire video is essentially about testing out this GeoJig, but it's really self-explanatory and super simple. As you can see, I'm using the 90-degree angle, and I'm using the rod that it comes with for 90-degree angle specifically, and I'm trying to use the clips as well, but honestly you don't even need it, especially with this 90-degree and using that rod. The glass kind of just wants to sit right where you need it to, and as long as your edges are meeting up corner to corner and it's not sitting flat or one is not sitting on top of the other, there's no overlapping, you're good to go. So as soon as I have them set in place, I just quickly tack solder them together. Because this jig is not meant to hold it the entire time that you're soldering, you need to just tack solder it in place on the jig, get your right angle, then you can pull it off and we can finish soldering it together. So as soon as I tack solder them in place, I pull them off the jig, and now we're kind of trying to align everything up. This is the tricky part. So yeah, you could make some type of jig to hold this together, but I really just line them up with my hands, and then I quickly grab my soldering iron and just drop a bead down that center where it meets at the bottom, because I know at the top I'm going to want to attach a jump ring with a rod. And that is exactly what you see me doing here. I am taking a very small millimeter copper rod, not too small, but not so heavy where I'm not able to bend it, and I am just wrapping it around my stained glass cutter here to make a loop and a rod at the end of it. So I am creating my own jump ring with a little tail on the end, so we can stick that down inside the top of our spinner, so we have a really strong jump ring for it to hold all of the weight of this spinner, and the sun catcher we're putting in the middle. So I've wrapped it around my stained glass cutter. Now I'm just going to take my pliers and bend it at a 90-degree angle, so it is super easy to slide it right in the top of our spinner and solder it in place. Okay, so we've created our little jump ring here with our tail. I'm going to snip the tail a little bit shorter, but I want to close this jump ring first. Before I close the jump ring, I'm going to slide the hanging chain on it first. That way we don't have to worry about attaching it with another jump ring later. So I've slid the chain on, I've closed that jump ring with solder. Now we're ready to place that jump ring down inside the top of our spinner here, and we are just going to completely solder it in place. We don't want this thing moving, and we're going to be very, very generous with the solder, making sure everything is completely encapsulated. Okay, so now that we've got our jump ring securely in place, we only have to go in now and just do any kind of touch-up soldering. We are going to attach this beautiful snowflake sun catcher charm that I got for the center of this thing. I just wanted it to be very clean and pretty, a very winter vibe, so I went ahead and soldered that on, gave it a nice clean. Now we are going in with patina. So of course I am using a very dark, nice black patina. It is a liquid patina from Novacan. I absolutely love it. As I always say, guys, if you do not have 2-inch nails and you are going to be coming in contact with these chemicals, please use the appropriate protection. Use gloves. Either way, whether you're wearing gloves or not, make sure you always wash your hands, use the correct protection. So we're going to go ahead and finish patinaing this piece. We're going to take it to the sink for one final bath, and then we will take a look at our final snowflake winter spinner. All right, everybody, that is it. So I guess the question is, what do I think of the GeoJig and what do I think of patterns and I guess Birch Glass as a whole? I approve, I approve, I approve. I cannot say it enough. The people themselves are super nice. I think it is a really good website to have as an option. They have patterns, they have jigs, they have a ton of stuff. So even if you're not specifically interested in something, I would definitely recommend that you at least go and check their website out because they have so much stuff on there, including even free patterns. So I think it's just an asset to kind of have them in the stained glass community as a whole. But yes, I absolutely approve of the Birch Glass GeoJig. I love it. I cannot wait to get my hands on another jig. Hopefully I will get their Lily one next and definitely try out some more patterns. But I'm most excited to kind of make my own designs and see what I can create now that I have their GeoJig, because having just those set standard angles ready to go to use over and over and over again and they don't move is super, super helpful. So my wheels are already turning in my brain. I have a ton of ideas as far as spinners that I can make and all the possibilities now that I have this GeoJig. So again, I absolutely approve. Go check out Birch Glass. I will have them and everything linked down below. I love it. So that's going to be it for today's video, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Check out my Patreon. If you're new here, I just started a Patreon and I'm doing not only more content in general, but I am also doing exclusive Patreon content for paid members. So go check that out. But yeah, I will have all those links down below. I hope you guys have an awesome day. Thank you for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye.